Okay, well, we will go ahead and open the planning board meeting for March 4th. If the planning board members want to go around and announce themselves for the record as present.
Be Abjurius.
John Cortizis.
Nick Rosettos. Brian Vernelli.
And Carrie Layton. Great, so we are opening the meeting first, and now we're going to, we have a continued public hearing, so let's do, I don't know if we open that or if we're continued, so it's technically already open, but let's commence the public hearing or recommence the public hearing. We have I think only really one outstanding item from the public hearing. We were amending the rules and regulations governing the subdivision of land in town. This was at the request of the government regulations asked for asked for us to review the fees table related to kind of everything in town, but for us, particularly the subdivision of land. And so we took a look at the fees table to make sure it matches our current practices, and that was sort of undertaken by Brian. So if you don't mind updating us on the suggested changes or strength areas.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess the only thing I would defer to you only that might be nice for Taylor to sort of kick off where he landed here. I'm happy to go with what we looked into either way.
That's up to Taylor. It was a hybrid of Ian and Taylor, so I would defer to Taylor, who knows this piece the best.
I can give an overview of what's being presented by myself as a solution to wrong computer. As a solution to a complicated fee schedule. What we have here shown on the screen is our current fee schedule for subdivision. It's fairly complex, and its complexity kind of creates this system that doesn't work, that the applicant doesn't necessarily know how much they're being charged, and then we might have a different opinion, and then there's sometimes this back and forth on how much the fee is for the subdivision of land. This is both for preliminary subdivision, definitive subdivision, and A&R. So I have suggested just a simplification of this, as well as a simplification of our administrative fees for our application reviews for the Central Business District and the MSMD. And this is just based off of kind of the more simple fee structures that we see in nearby towns. This was shown to the board on December 4th, and I know that this is where I'm going to bring you in, Brian, that you met with some internal staff members to get to take this and take it one step further.
So we did. So Ian and myself, we met with people in the building department, and we specifically looked at the design review, site plan review, special permit, so the top half of this chart. And then we were able to compare. So what they do in the building department is they're collecting those fees for the rest of the town, and these are the fees for site plan review, design review in those areas that we oversee. And as you could see in the other chart, there was a complicated chart with how all of this was originally done. They do it just a flat fee. They don't have to look through any of this for that's more for the subdivision of land, but for the site plan review and design review, they just have a flat fee. And so the recommendation that Ian and I got out of that meeting, I think, was to have a flat fee that would be ideally for site plan review and or design reviews for both, just a flat fee for both of them. And we thought $250 made sense for that. Is that's sort of what you got out of that meeting as well?
Yeah, 250.
And then the other recommendation that came out of that meeting was, which is maybe not important to have here, but in the top here we have any additional advertising costs for applications requiring a public hearing will be billed directly to the applicant by the Daily Times Chronicle. Maybe make that more general, that says any additional costs related to the process, which includes mailings, because right now the applicants are paying for those mailings, so it seems like that should be included in there. So that's sort of some of the conclusions we came to, again, looking only at sort of this top half here. And then I guess the last thing was Carla down there had done a nice breakout for other towns for what they're charging, again, not necessarily for site plan review in other towns or special permits in other towns, excuse me, site plan review in other towns. And they are flat fees ranging from $400 in Arlington, $100 in Lexington, Belmont's $150, Stoneham's $150 or $200, Melrose is $350. So this is sort of in the range of what we're looking at for other towns. So, and that's sort of what we did with that. As far as the subdivision of land, we didn't dig into it as deeply, other than to look at, we sat down and looked at the chart that we had before and realized that it was insanely complicated, and this is vastly easier to understand how to do this. So nicely done, DraftKings.
One thing I had about the subdivisions, it seems like that would be an area that we would want to increase because of all the time it takes, because of all the labor hours it takes from the planning board. And I'm wondering, what was it before and what is it now?
So it is actually an increase, but it's hard to sort of compare because we would be going from a complicated fee schedule that has how many buildable lots, and there's an adjustment. If you could go to the next, oh, that's it, yeah. Would be, if you look how many buildable lots are there, and then preliminary subdivision would based on the number of lots. Proposed linear feet of roadway. So what Ian and I sort of did is we sat down a couple of scenarios and said, well, let's imagine where it's a preliminary subdivision for 4 units, and how many feet, sort of put everything in the middle and say, well, what would this spit out to? And this is an increase. This is going to represent more closely or closer to what our actual time
This you're talking about 5,000 as a base?
Well, that's definitive. Preliminary is what's
1,000.
1,000 plus $500 per lot, whereas the old fee structure was dependent on the number of lots in a generic bucket, how many linear feet of roadway, whether there's environmental considerations. It was quite a complicated process. I'm not actually sure how someone
So
would
there are
work
10
through their way through
buildable
that.
lots, it would be 10 times 500.
Yes.
And we're talking here, 10 buildable lots created was, or greater than 10 was 1,000, 4 to 10 was 750.
That's for A&R, the first.
Just for A&R.
That's for A&R.
So what's the, where's,
So it would be Form B, so it would be greater than 10 lots, would be $750.
okay.
Then you'd have to look at the linear feet of roadway.
So 4 to 10 lots in the original was $500 in total. 10 lots in the new is 10 times 500 or 5,000.
Plus
That's
1,000.
1,000. So that's 6,000. So it's much higher.
Is much higher.
And that does make sense.
Certainly seeing how much time goes into it on your end, it's more representative of what we do. But it also doesn't require anyone to look at the roadway gradient and have to be submitting that, or environmental considerations, or, I mean, it sort of just makes it easier to understand. Yes, it's more, but it makes it easier to understand as well.
No, seems, I mean, seems like a significant increase to me. Yes. Which is, I think, a good thing.
When, does anyone know the last time it was updated?
I mean, I suppose not including the
These look
1963.
very familiar.
The original clay tablets are somewhere.
We're using the modern currency.
So I have a couple of comments.
well,
but-
yeah, that's,
oh,
good, that's a good point. I mean,
It's probably been a while. I
I'd say
don't know.
2013, but That's a guess based off of other updates in the
2013, you think, or the?
That's just based off of other updates in the
Okay.
subdivision bylaw. There's no way for me to know exactly.
Yeah,
I was able to get feedback from, do you feel like that's,
I think it's older than that. I think
Okay.
most of it is older than that.
okay.
Yeah, a lot of it.
I was able to get feedback from Suzanne Gill, who does takes the checks from applicants and does the calculation, and she was very in favor of it. And she was particularly grateful that the fees for postings and for mailings would be transferred because those costs can be significant for the town.
So there were a couple of points I brought up last time that I feel like I'm going to bring them up again. One is that the previous schedule gave you a break if you did both a preliminary and a definitive subdivision. So I still think that's a valid thing to do. I think it would encourage people to come in and do the preliminary subdivision, which I think is really valuable.
I see.
The other thing is that I would really like to see these tied to some sort of a hour for an FTE, so that it would be easier to update this on an ongoing basis. And also, if someone comes in and wants to know why does it cost $5,000, it would be nice to be able to say it will take X amount of hours of our town engineer and our town planner.
How are we counting the volunteers then?
We're not counting the volunteers at all. Because notice you have no administrative fee for design review. And design review has to go through so many committees, right? So we don't get any, we can't make money out of this, and they're not paying us, so it's zero. Big fat zero. So those are my only 2 points. I mean, I don't know. Again, like I said last time, I trust that you have done your homework and these are reasonable numbers, but it would be really good to be able to base those on some hourly rate. And I have no idea how much you would discount the, what is the discount for the old one? What page is it on? I have no idea. Where is the page? Somewhere on here there's a discount. Where'd it go? Maybe take $1,000 off. I don't know if you want to completely say your preliminary counts towards your definitive. I mean, that could be
No, because because preliminaries can take a significant amount of effort, and sometimes they don't make it to definitive. So I agree that having that encouraging preliminary, I mean that is what we want. We want to encourage a preliminary before definitive. And using a cost reduction there is probably a good way of doing it. But eliminating it is not the right thing to do.
eliminating. No, I mean.
Yeah, eliminating the $1,000.
No. You still have to pay the $1,000.
I think you were saying that you paid the $1,000, but then if you went to the definitive, you get a credit for the money that
You get a credit for the money.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I think it'll have to see how it shakes out in terms of how much money it actually costs.
Just like to add that I think that what I was suggesting, although it's not reflected in here, is that we sort of mimic what's done in town, in that site plan review and or design review would be a flat fee, and that design review being zero doesn't make sense because it still has to go, still needs time from staff to be reviewed. But
Yes.
so I don't think zero makes sense there. I think that site plan review and or design review should be some number. For simplicity, I'd say 250, but if a different number makes sense, that's fine too. But that was what was suggested to us, and that I was suggesting we do. But
So design review, how much, that's It's mostly volunteers, but you guys, the planning department doesn't have to put stuff together, or is that, no, it's the building department that puts
Yeah,
stuff
Tom
together?
can send it to design review and take their,
Yeah,
Yeah, so, but these are just for the Central Business District and Main Street, so this is all just planning related. So the design
oh,
review.
right.
The design review will be mostly coordinated just in the planning department. It is, an example of a design review is Lucia's. We're going through design
Yeah,
review right now.
Yeah,
It certainly does take planning department time, but it's not as significant as site plan review.
so,
Site plan review, you involve engineering and building, where design review, you only, it's just me and Ian.
so that's when I'm starting to look at this, because I know site plan review, they have to do the stormwater depending upon things. So, $250 is 2 hours, 3 hours, not including overhead?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
4? You're really pushing it.
It depends. The salary.
We need to pay you more if it's 4.
Well, yeah.
So, I mean, I would imagine site plan review probably takes at least 10 hours.
It's going to depend on the project.
Yeah. I'm worried that it's not covering costs. And, again, we can't make money, but I am worried it's not covering costs. And certainly, I think, Brian, you're right, design review should have some amount of monies.
And the rationale for them being the same, even though neither one probably covers cost, is that simplicity of collecting the fee. Just there's a fee. You need design review, site plan review, it's $250, as opposed to saying, oh, you need this or that. It just makes life easy. And I think there's something value to that. That's what this whole chart is about, making life easy so it's easier to collect these fees.
I think the chart is, if we just settle with this page, I think we can survive having different amounts for design review and site plan review. I mean,
but I think zero, I feel like some investment makes sense. Some recognition that there's, $50, like some sort of engagement.
so
I don't know.
I think, again, it really has to be
Work does have
driven.
value.
I think it has to be driven by the actual number of hours that go into it. And then,
I would almost suggest that it goes backwards from that, though. If you think we're sort of setting a rate to build in town, we're creating sort of a fee schedule that should make us not not easier to build in and not more difficult than the neighbors. So that's not a deciding factor for which town you build in. And then from that, we should adjust our salaries to make sure that their scope of work includes this work and they're fairly compensated for how much time they spend on it. And do we have enough staff to cover the scope of work that's expected for these tasks?
I don't disagree with that, but that would argue that we set everything to zero and just get
No,
our.
because then everyone would try to build only in Winchester because our fees are zero. So it doesn't make sense. You want to create a reasonable, you want to sort of take that piece out of it and kind of go with the neighbors so that we're equivalent there, and then our process is our process and our staff is delightful. So Winchester every time.
The other side is, who are the applicants? And again, if this weren't in the CBD and the other areas, we're not going to see a lot of, residents coming in. I think we're going to see developers mostly. So if this were for residents, I would say we should try to keep the fees as low as reasonable. But I think developers
Right.
have the
So-
pockets to be able to pay, what the going rate is for the work that's done. And I think it makes sense so if we don't put it into the fees, it comes out of the taxpayers. And it seems like the fees, this is extra work in a sense. There's already enough work, and so I think that the fees should, again, I go back, I think the fees should represent how much time is put into it. Maybe we discount it at some level, say 75%, but
Two sides of the same coin. I think our staffing levels should represent the work we're expecting them to do. And compensation. Either way, if you don't, I feel like design review should incur some costs so that there's engagement with it, instead of making it seem like a valueless proposition.
So Brian, with the design review, what were the numbers from the other towns?
So, I don't want to guarantee. These were the numbers that we got from Carla, and these were. This was site plan review, not design review. I don't have it broken down by
Okay.
that. They were ranged from 100 as a low to $500. It depended.
I mean, I would, based on that, I mean, I would think that, let's say, site plan or design review is $125. That's an hour and a half.
For design review?
Yeah. And we'll leave site plan review as is, as the 250, and then I think we should review, just keep track of what the actual workload is and see, after a year, see what it.
So where does
You look perplexed.
where would that design review money, I know it would be collected in the building department. Does it go into their budget or?
It goes to the general fund? Goes to the general fund. Who knows, John? It's not earmarked. I mean, it comes back, but.
Right, but it doesn't, like, they have a budget and it doesn't.
Right. It doesn't
fund any of the
translate
staff here.
directly to staff. That's
Correct.
why I think
Or,
they're
you know,
separate. Yeah.
They-
Does 125 seem like a fair? Nick, what do you think on
I
125?
think it sounds, I think it does sound fair to me.
Taylor? Okay, so that's one edit. Any other, before we sort of,
The only other edit that had been suggested to us was to, in the second paragraph on the top, to change that to say additional costs. I don't really want to wordsmith it, but additional costs which may include postage, printing, advertising in the Daily Times Chronicle will be billed to the applicant, something like that. But it's the content that matters there, and I'm not particularly concerned about the wordsmithing of that.
Well, this would include presumably mailings to abutters.
Yes.
So you'd have to broaden the.
We have
language.
existing language that covers this that we can use.
Okay.
great. And then did we want to make a change to apply preliminary subdivision fees that move on to definitive subdivision to the cost of the definitive subdivision?
Not beyond the $1,000, I wouldn't think. I would think the $1,000 perhaps. I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn. Maybe definitive subdivision, if you've done a preliminary, is $1,000 less. But I don't know if that. And again, your time is probably spent a lot more than that, knowing how much time you spend on these kind of things.
I would be comfortable with that.
Nick, any concerns about that?
That sounds-
Okay, so with that, we've got that edit down somewhere.
And one last edit, maybe remove Daily Times Chronicle and put in
Yes.
a generic word for,
Newspaper. It has to be a print
I
newspaper.
checked to make sure that was still newspaper.
We're not allowed.
hard copy public.
or similar publication, or
I mean,
to have a
pertinent
certain-
publication.
Certain number of,
you could bundle it with your Stop and Shop flyer that comes.
if only. So.
Okay, any other issues to raise around this fees table? Any other edits? I feel like we've got
There
our
are three
hand
edits,
on the
really.
changes. Yeah.
Edit to the second paragraph, edit to design review to 125,
Yeah.
edit to definitive subdivision, which would be $4,000 plus $500 a lot if you did a preliminary subdivision.
Right.
I move we approve the fee schedule as presented, as presented and amended with our discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Taylor, for all the work that you put into making those numbers.
Yes, we do have on the agenda of the public hearing amendments to the regulations of the governing Section 8.2 Main Street Mixed-Use District of the Town of Winchester, Massachusetts zoning bylaw, but we concluded that at the previous section of the public hearing, so now we can close the public hearing. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Second, third, fourth, and for the fifth. All in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is now closed. And we did open the meeting. I'm going to take a brief second to thank WinCam for bringing us to our millions of viewers, to thank our recording secretary, Cheryl Dennis. If our number one fan, Henry, is watching, to say hello to Henry. And do the board or staff have any updates?
I have several updates. I'm just not sure if they're going to be covered later on.
If they're on the agenda, we'll at least have space for them. Is there anything that's not on the agenda that you want to update us
That
on?
would be the article for the MOD, which was taken off the agenda, so I didn't know if I wanted to update on.
I think it's a great update. Go for it.
Okay. So I've been working with Fugger Associates to get the EFA done. Diab and I spoke about a month ago now. Then I worked with them to get everything just right. And then it's been, there's been a lot of back and forth with town manager's office to get everything just right, because there were some issues with insurance and various things. My understanding is that that will be approved this week. However, the consultant is actually out of town this week, so the soonest they could start on that would be next week. And I kept on, I've been working on this nonstop since September, thinking that there's some way we could make this in time for Springtown meeting. I even had in the packet a draft bylaw revision that's being reviewed by council to see if it would be acceptable. And we could submit.
What does EFA stand for?
So that's the economic feasibility analysis. So I should back up, because I apologize. I realize that I'm in my own mind too much. We were looking at adjusting the affordable housing requirements in the MBT3A overlay. They do not match what we do in the CVD or the MSMD. And it mostly has to do with rounding, where they round down. It also has to do with require in the Center Business District, we start at 6 units. And so at 6 units, you have to have one affordable. In the MBTA 3A, it doesn't start till 10. And then it rounds down. So you don't get a second unit until you get to 20. So when you have 20 units, you have 2. And so what we were trying to do is the state requires us to have an economic feasibility analysis to show that it's not overly burdensome on a developer. We are close to having this all done, but I think we're just running out of time.
You know, I think that we could look at, what's the probability that something is going to be done and built between fall and Springtown meeting. And so there's a possibility we may lose out on that one building, but it may be that we take the extra time to really cross our T's and dot our I's. It sounds like you put in a really lot of work into it, and I think it's a good foundation. But it's almost 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, and it might just be easier for everyone to perhaps put it off until the fall. But I don't know what I suppose something might happen between now and then. I don't know what the probability of that is.
So at this point, I hate to say this, that's my recommendation, because I'm afraid town meeting doesn't like things rushed.
Sure.
So we would basically be submitting.
Neither does the planning board.
We would be submitting a warrant article to the warrant without data to support it.
I see.
Hoping that the data came in, we would have to withdraw it if it was not supported, or try to change it.
Right.
We're at the point where, it's really the 11th hour.
Right.
I kept on thinking that I was going to be able to pull it out, and I don't think I can. So I think in the original packet, it might still be in the packet, is the proposed bylaw change, but I can't support it now because we don't have the data for it, and I'm just afraid that we're going to, just will be a mess.
I think you get support from this board on that.
We would also, we have full 3A compliance, and I think per Taylor's point, we would be the first town to amend a compliant 3A bylaw, and that is not a record I want to set, but without being very confident that what we're bringing forward is ready and has good support, so. If we, if miraculously, the warrant officially closes on the 14th, so if they get it to us Tuesday, you're pretty teed up, but.
That, I know they're out of town till the weekend, so that would be a lot of.
It would be another scramble, and I'm happy to hop off the roller coaster. But if it works out, it works out.
Yeah,
so
right.
Let's assume it is not going in for, but that we'll get to warrant articles later.
Yeah, so
But
that's
thank
the
you
only
for
update I had
Yeah.
that's not elsewhere in the agenda. So.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Updates? All right. We are postponing approval of the meeting minutes. I think we have a long list to do at our next meeting, but they were not ready to be included in the packet. So the 18th, look forward to this long series of motions and seconds.
Just to continue on updates, just really quick, my conversation with constituents and the 88 Harvard Street demolition by neglect situation keeps coming up.
Yes.
And so I just wanted to see that it would perhaps be on some future meeting that's not quite as busy as the one that we're currently.
It absolutely will be. Yep. And I think that's a very long, detailed process. And if we start now,
Right.
we're going to lose you.
Understood. Absolutely understood. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's we're gathering information. I think that will be an exciting part of a meeting soon. But thank you for bringing it up.
Is that actually something under our bylaws or under the town bylaws?
Which
Demolition by neglect. I don't know if we have
it's
it.
not in the town bylaw.
And I
It
don't
is-
think it's in our zoning bylaws, is it?
Right. So that's why it's a long discussion.
Yeah, so we'd
Yeah.
have to,
It's-
it'd be bringing forward something to amend the bylaws.
It's
Okay.
more the initiation of an effort than a quick mention of the bylaw. That's why we're not starting it tonight, but I appreciate that you raised it. Anything else? Anything? Do you have anything? Okay. So 513 Mount Vernon. So this is Lucia's, and we met with this is our first convening of the CBDRS, and there have been some learning opportunities. And we would, who would like to update us on their process with the CBDRS? I know we had Taylor was there, Brian was there. Taylor was not there. Ian was there, Brian was there.
I'm happy to sort of debrief how that meeting went, but I don't know how specifically. That was the only topic of conversation was this, and we unfortunately didn't have the full quorum of members at that meeting. So in the minute on page 43 are draft minutes, because that's going to be one of the issues as we talk about the CBDRS, is as minutes are written up, the CBDRS didn't have enough time to review the minutes because obviously they haven't met yet till now, so these are still draft minutes. This is a historic structure, and as such, the CBDRS requires 3 members of Historical Commission and 2 members of the DRC. Through various scheduling snafus, we did not have the full number of that.
So that those 2 committees were the cause of the lack of.
No, the cause was some disconnect in our communication of getting.
No, not blaming them, but
Oh, no.
it was the fact that we didn't have the members of historical.
The proportion of members was
Yeah.
not correct for the issue that was at hand. So this is the first convening of the CBDRS, which is meant to be an efficiency body that will allow applicants to meet with members of historic and design review together before coming back to the planning board for final approval. And the recommendation will come from that coordinated body. It's the first time we've put it together. There were scheduling challenges, and then the quorum for the meeting was out of proportion. And so,
I wasn't able
fortuitously, each of the individual bodies had happened to meet and discuss the project before the CBDRS came together. So we had recommendations of proper quorum from both bodies before the CBDRS convened. And I don't think the conclusions were different. Officially, we'll be taking the recommendations of the committees that were properly quorumed. But I still think it's worth going through the exercise of hearing how it went, because it's the model for how it will go all the months in the future, which are scheduled and should be smoother.
And that was a good question that I actually had when we were there, was we had 5 members. We were required to have 5 different, one different member. What is actually a quorum of that body? Would 3 of those 5 constitute a quorum? So that's a good question I don't know the answer to, because when you're did we actually have a quorum? I just don't know how it would work. So I think that's a...
Did we have enough planning board members?
No planning board members are officially on the CBDRS. We are advisory.
We're advisory,
Yeah,
okay.
so...
Well, we're not, they're advisory to us.
Yeah,
We're not,
Yes, we
observing.
are not members of the CBDRS.
and
is
we,
what-
we should have no interface with them, because they are advising to us. So
No, we have 2 liaisons to the CBDRS.
we have liaisons?
We have 2. The 2 of us are the liaisons to CBDRS.
Okay.
At least we voted that, and
I just want to make
April.
sure people don't feel like there's an extra pinky finger on the scales because there are 2 members of the planning board who are sitting there. I think that's the idea, is they are an independent body. I do have, if I could back up a bit. So before us right now, we have, well, on our agenda or in our packet, it talks about requested waivers. So that means they haven't actually put an official packet, they haven't submitted an official proposal to the town.
We did it last time when we accepted the applicant. We did it at our last meeting.
But these are waivers to the requirements, which means that they haven't actually submitted yet.
They submitted their packet on January 4th, and the planning board voted to approve the packet.
So where did the requested waivers come from then?
It was part of the packet.
So the waivers are to what you, typically, we've had a request for waivers prior to submission, so that so the submission would be complete as per those waivers. So accepting a packet which includes a request for waivers seems backwards. Because then you've accepted the packet, and then you're going to go in and rule on whether the waivers are consistent or agreed upon. So it's not a complete packet until we've ruled that the waivers are acceptable. Because, for instance, in the complete packet, did they provide a site development plan? Probably not, because they're asking a waiver for it.
Right, so it's my understanding that the planning board approved the waivers that were being requested
Did
at
we?
their original meeting.
Okay, then please refresh my memory. Did we approve them?
Is this supposed to be 5 to 13 Mount Vernon?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So did we approve them? Does anyone remember?
Yes.
Yes, we did.
We did? Okay, thank you. So I got confused. It's been so long.
January.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
The dark
It
times.
was freezing cold.
We were too cold to remember.
Okay, so I apologize. Thank you for whoever shouted out from the audience. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard Leaf, from the back. Okay, so
Ultimately, the recommendation from the non-quorumed CBDRS was, I'll just pull it up again and we can, so many pages it on. Pleased with the proposal, but no formal vote was made. And then we have also the minutes from the Historical Commission included in the packet, and we have the minutes from the Design Review Committee. The DRC voted unanimously favorable action. The Historic Commission did not vote, but I'm trying to find where those minutes are. try. It's there's so many pages in this document. Page.
Were there any suggestions for change?
So there were numerous suggestions for how things could go that went all around. Being the first CBDRS, it was a wide open discussion that ultimately concluded that this was a good plan to move forward.
Okay. So there was no consensus that something could be tweaked?
There was no consensus that anything should be changed.
Okay.
But I'm trying to find the Historic Commission minutes.
If only we had a way of getting a summary about what the Historic Commission decided.
It would be very helpful if we had somebody from the Historic Commission could give us a summary.
Maybe if we all hope hard enough.
Maybe the chair would even be here. Oh, wait. Here it is. On page 38. The Historic Commission did not vote on this, but they did discuss it at their meeting.
Commission expressed its support for the project.
Appreciation for the preservation effort, noting that maintaining the building, one of the center business district's most historic buildings, aligned with the intents of the CBD rezoning. No motion was necessary, but the commission expressed its support for the project.
Yeah. So I think that's in line with the CBTRS, which, while no motion was made, expressed support for the project.
Great.
So I thought we had a pretty good discussion. I think I'm remembering some of our last meeting,
We
except
did.
maybe
You were
the
here.
votes.
It was good.
I remember being here. So I thought we had a pretty good discussion then. I think the only thing that came up really was, once the detective work of determining what's actually underneath that frontage or whatever it's called, they might have to come back and tweak things based on what they find. But I would recommend that we approve the design with the proviso that should something be uncovered underneath there which prevents following through on the design, they come back to this board to review what they have to do.
Is there
I guess I'll make a motion. or a recommendation.
They find
formed-
something that is of interest from a historical perspective underneath what they're,
Or if they discover that they are unable to do what they wanted to because of some structural issue,
Sure.
that rather than just trying to fix it in an ad hoc fashion, they come back before us, explain what the issue is and how it can be resolved.
Is this a condition to the motion?
That would be a condition to the approval, I guess.
Okay. So the motion would be to approve and then,
With the condition that they come back if they discover that they cannot fulfill their original design.
okay, great. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great, thank you. Further discussion, I'll note that we have one citizen letter that was submitted and is in the packet and in the record, but we won't discuss it. It came in fairly late, but it is part of the packet.
is there a particular page? Well,
It was, it's on page 46.
Thank you, Diab. Page 46.
It's from Jamie Duvall.
It's from Jamie Duval.
Okay.
She is an architect and a member of the DRC and the CBDRS, but she submitted the comments as a citizen letter, and it has been included.
okay.
Other discussion on the topic? Okay, all in favor of approving with the condition as stated? Unanimously passes. We look forward to it. It will look great.
That's very exciting.
Good luck with the project.
I really want to see what's underneath it, but
We would like to be there the day.
You should ask what day they're going to open it up and then just make sure you just happen to be
I want it live streamed on YouTube.
To the petitioner, I'll issue a decision to you within 14 days and give you more information on next steps.
I am going to bring this up because it raised in a side discussion that it's something I want us to percolate on, is the idea of having a planning board member assigned to projects as a liaison person. I don't think we're ready to set that up yet, but I want us to think about it as projects come up, where we could sort of say, if you have a question, Conservation Commission has a commissioner assigned to each of the projects that comes before Concom, and we've tossed around doing that for the CBD and for the MSMD before. And
So would the
just an
idea
idea.
be that that person would also then be responsible for writing up when we have like a long decision or something? That person, like, they would be the one who would have done the deeper dive.
Yeah, kind of monitor the project, help them decide, does this come back to the board? And then when the final approval is ready, they help organize the information and present written materials to summarize the project. I just want to start creating the pause where we might say, Nick, would you like to liaise on this project? But we're not ready to do that yet, but I think it would be a positive change.
It makes sense to not have the chair have to do all of those things, I thoroughly believe.
I mean, I think we all have different interest areas, and it might be nice to have a person instead of coming to us all the time. Not that we're not the funnest board, but still. Okay, great. On to 16 Hancock Street. Do we have people here from 16 Hancock? We have a lot of people here. Do we want to take anything out of order? Or are we?
Nobody's here for 16
We have
Hancock.
floodplain and 10 Converse.
Okay.
Nobody's here for 16 Hancock. We should
And
call.
do we have Kiaraman here?
So Kiraman, we are going to briefly mention that they're going to meet with the CBDRS.
Okay.
And not the plan. We've met with them. They changed the design. The design looks very nice. And per the math of the design, per Brian, it meets the 70% transparency criteria. But because it is a design decision, sort of the most efficient way, rather than having us say, it's a sign, should we talk to the design review, is to have that change go through the CBDRS body and then come back to us for final approval. I don't know if we do have the picture. It's on page 111 in the packet. But I think the CBDRS is the right place to discuss that.
I agree.
So
And they
it
can
is
dig
noted
in.
that we are excited to engage with them. We continue to enjoy their food, and we look forward to the fresh look. But the CBDRS will be who weighs in on that. And they convene on March 20th. Next.
Floodplain or 10 Converse.
Okay, so let's do, the floodplain should be fairly straightforward. So under warrant articles, we have postponed the second item to the fall, and we've gotten the update from Brian. So let's talk about the floodplain quickly. Pour slowly. We have Matt Schumann coming to the table. Do you have approach music you would like us to play? So this will be an article that is brought by the planning board, but think of it as the planning department, and none of us will be saying much about it because we would really bungle Matt's good work here. So
Do you have the slides by any chance?
Oh, yeah. You got to give me a sec. Sorry.
That's okay.
should I
So basically, we're going to be updating the floodplain, sections of the floodplain zoning bylaw to comply with the most recent state model floodplain bylaw, which was revised in around 2021. And we're also incorporating, by reference, updated floodplain maps. So FEMA is doing almost all of Massachusetts, but they started with Eastern Massachusetts first in terms of remapping. I think it was about 72 communities that are being remapped. The maps, the odd thing about this remapping is it's only based on topography, so they didn't do any kind of calculations, any new analysis compared to what was done in 2010. They basically updated the topography based on LiDAR data from a couple of years ago, and they just remapped the floodplain outline based on that information. So the changes are very minor. I don't know if folks were around in around 2010, but there was a pretty major remapping done at that time, and a lot of properties were added in. There are some that were added in and some that were removed in this time around, but it was much less substantial than in the past. So this is something that we need to do, the town needs to do to maintain its good standing with FEMA. FEMA issues flood insurance for properties that are in the floodplain. One of the town's obligations is to use the FEMA floodplain maps and to have a zoning ordinance or zoning bylaw that complies with their requirements. In the absence of the slides, I can walk you through some of the changes. I'll say that the bylaw changes were reviewed by the state floodplain coordinator. So he's reached out to pretty much every community. Every community has to at least update the date of the maps, the effective date. And we also reached out to legal counsel to have them review it and make sure that the changes were legal. Oh, there we go.
Showtime.
So you could probably just scroll down. You can just keep going. I basically said everything there. So, yeah, so there was a public comment period last summer. There weren't really any comments received by FEMA on their proposed maps. So now they are now adopting them. The effective date of the maps is July 8th. So we're required to have our zoning updated by July 8th, which means we have to go to spring town meeting. So as I said, no new scientific flooding analysis. The town's 25 or so year flood control program are not incorporated into the maps or the bylaw.
So this is separate from the culvert project?
This is separate from that project. It is required for us to do this. However, the town remains committed to doing its own process to update the floodplain maps once the Morocco, which is the last project, is complete. So you may recall we had a capital request in for funding last summer for spring town meeting. I believe it is still going to be in front of spring town meeting. So once Morocco is done, we can start that. That's a physical map revision. It's a slightly different process than what FEMA went through, but it would allow us to update the maps based on our flood mitigation program. So with that, I think...
Which one more directly impacts people's insurance?
Which one? Well, I would say that the town's flood mitigation program is going to remove a lot of properties from the floodplain, so that's the most impactful.
I feel
this was just changing topography, so like if you were, say, a foot either side, maybe you were added or you were removed, but it would not be as substantial as our work has been.
Okay.
So I think with that, I think the next slides are the actual language. Okay, yeah, so it is an overlay district, so that is that's the language in the bylaw, is the floodplain overlay district, and then there's some definitions in the definitions section of the zoning bylaw. So the first section changing, we're just changing the effective dates of the maps, the flood insurance rate map, basically the flood maps, to make them effective. They are adding a Zone A. There's a slight difference between Zone A and Zone AE, but essentially they're both floodplain. So we didn't have a Zone A before. There is a Zone A being added around Winter Pond. So we are adding that language into this. This is just a change of language to comply with the state floodplain bylaw. It's actually pretty similar, but worded differently and worded exactly how the state wants us to word it. And then this was something that wasn't clear to anyone if this was a leftover from a previous iteration, so we're just removing it for clarity. Recreation, again, we now have a Zone A, so we're adding in a reference to Zone A. And then I don't think anyone's going to be opening any mines in Winchester in the floodplain, but that was a word that was missing that the state found, so they asked us to add that. And then in definitions, highest adjacent grade is also another technical term that they asked us to add into the definitions.
And so to be clear, that's the language of the article that we'll be submitting to the warrant, and you worked on that with
Yes.
town council and with state
Yes.
guidance?
Yes, and thanks to Taylor and Ian for helping with that as well.
Okay. Okay, any questions for Matt? No one wants to really dive into the details of the...
Logistic question. At town meeting, you will speak to this, I presume, or someone?
Someone will.
understands-
We haven't.
Someone who understands
Yeah.
flood mapping?
We haven't spoken about who would present. If you will be bringing the article, if the planning board wants me to speak, I do the presentation. I can do the presentation, or I can be there to answer questions and whatnot.
Just save the date, okay?
I think the last time we did this, the town planner presented, and then you or your predecessor, I think was Beth. Yeah, she answered questions.
I'm happy to do the presentation as well. We'll coordinate.
Yeah, we have plenty of time to figure that out. The most important thing is that it's just brought by the planning board, and we somehow make it clear that it's a planning board article with planning board support.
Yeah.
And essentially, that would be the presentation I would give at town meeting.
Yeah. I mean, the key thing is that this is required by the state, that the language is prescribed by the state,
Yes.
and there's not a lot we can do.
Yes.
I think that's the key point.
Okay.
Any other questions or concerns, or can we have a motion to bring this article to Springtown meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second? Great. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your work on this.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Okay, so why don't we,
Who is physically giving that to, somebody has to physically send this to, that'll be, okay. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a cross. Sorry.
okay, so we have 10 Converse here, is that right?
Are we?
Okay, so if you don't mind, you can step right up. So just for a little context, what are you looking at?
That's Hancock. Are we not doing Hancock?
Do we have anyone here from 16 Hancock?
Because that's.
I'm just trying to, we've got people here, so I'm trying to
Okay.
make sure that we address the folks who are here. So for 10 Converse Place, I want to set this up. This is a complex project that we're doing this visit to get an overview of the status of the project. We are not making any decisions. We're not even really asking questions about the plan. We're going to hear what the plan is, where we are in the process. When it came through the first time, there were choreography issues where the planning board was a little out of step with the Conservation Commission. This is a very central property in town. It's right in the middle of our downtown. It really helps define the skyline. We're all excited to see a different building there. We're all excited to see progress on this parcel, but this is a private property that's that's on the waterfront, and in between those two elements, we have the bike path, which is controlled by the select board. We're across the street from the firehouse. This is going to be a full family organization, and so as a courtesy, we're trying to get a sense of where the project is, what we anticipate to see coming forward. We know we've got new folks involved, so we want to say hello to everyone, but again, we're not discussing the plan. We just want to give a sense of what the planning board's expectations for next steps are, and get a sense from the applicant of what they're thinking about the parcel and where they see the process as at present. So don't be offended if I'm not calling on many people for this. We're mostly here to listen.
And to the applicant, we have 2 spaces. As many people can speak as you want, but we have 2 microphones. I'm going to bring the board to you so that you can flip through your own presentation.
Thank you very much. Oh, pass these around. Great. Oh,
Great, thank you.
here's one. Oh, okay.
And you can just go down. You can flip through it, and you can do it. So you don't hit that.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Oh, dear. Okay. We should talk to them first. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us tonight. I'm Paul Onyebane with Urban Spaces. I represent the development team. We are going to be standing in place of the previous developer. We have the property under agreement, but right now it's hung up in a little bit of a morass with, the previous developer has declared personal bankruptcy, so the property is in jeopardy a little bit with the lender. It's almost on the verge of foreclosure. So we've stepped in an effort to try to move the project forward before it goes to that point with the bank. We've had some great conversations with the lender. They're very excited about it. More importantly, though, we've had some great conversations with the select board and with the planning staff, and are excited to be here tonight to sort of just give you an update about where we've gone in the last few months. So we have a presentation tonight. We've basically kept the original team intact. We have the Haseen team from architecture, Larry Beals from the environmental side, and our mission has been really to keep the original planning board approval intact as much as possible. We really wish we could have just taken the exact plan as it was and not had any modifications, but we did feel that we need to make some what we would consider relatively minor modifications, and we can walk through what those are tonight and see what you think of them. But basically, again, our goal was to keep the project as it was for the most part, but recognizing we've been 20 years developing projects just like this, mid-size residential projects, usually close to downtown urban centers, much like this one. And we, in our experience, believe that these tweaks are necessary to make the project successful and viable, make sure it doesn't, go into bankruptcy itself. So with that in mind, we can walk through the presentation, and I guess will David be doing that?
Hi, everyone. I'm David Haseen, and David Tebenkin is the principal, who is the project architect from when we all met with you a number of years ago, and I will turn it over to him to take you through where we're at.
So essentially what we're going to walk you through is some proposed changes to the project and the sort of reasoning why these are happening. This is a summary of those changes. The first big one is to address an issue with the puzzle parking system that was part of the approval in 2022. Urban Spaces believes that this really is not viable for the project, and because of issues with making these work in a private residential project. So the plan is to basically eliminate that and in its place put traditional self-parking, which we feel is a better for residents, makes the project more viable. However, it will take up more space. Paul, is there any comment you wanted to add?
Well, that's great. Just so everyone appreciates this, as you may recall, the original plan called for getting its parking requirements and parking density through a single level of parking, but because the footprint isn't big enough to fit all the spaces that were necessary, they reverted to an automated parking system, which basically has no drive aisles, and instead the cars move on a track. It's a great system if you have a hotel or a 24/7 valet sort of environment, but that's not the case here. Obviously, it's it's just a traditional residential building, and in our experience, this is a deal killer. People don't want to live in a building where they have something like this. They're always going offline. If they're not maintained or valeted, they're just a disaster. So that was really the initial change that rippled into the next changes.
Right. So essentially, with self-parking and drive aisles, taking up more space in order to maintain a parking count that we're trying to hit at least one, if not more, spaces per unit. So essentially, the way to do that, we still have one level of underground parking, but also looking at taking some of the ground floor, which previously had been designated for 2 retail spaces, 3 residential units, and the building lobby and the entrance to the parking, and creating additional parking on that level. So we'll show you plans to see how that impacted the plan. Because we're then displacing some of this program from the ground floor, the retail space and residential units, in order to make this economically viable, maintain the floor area ratio that was approved, which was just under 3.0, but 2.99. we're looking at displacing some of those residential units, eliminating a bit of the retail space, and essentially, by reallocating some of the height in the floors, increase the building height by 7 feet to add in this additional floor to maintain the unit count.
And I might add, we did this sort of carefully with the retail. We understood that an objective of the planning board and the decision was to maintain a multi-use building, residential and retail. So we do that still. It's obviously primarily residential, and we have retail. So we did eliminate some of the retail to make way for cars, but we also kept the retail in where we think is the most important place to have it, which is sort of along the waterfront. So as you'll see, perhaps not unlike the original plan, the idea is to have a nice retail bay, maybe a coffee shop or something, some kind of community use where it opens up onto the green space that then overlooks the waterfront.
Yeah. And then,
I was going to ask, it looks like there's also some awnings on the Mount Vernon Street side. Are those, but I guess that's coming up.
we'll walk you through. We'll walk you through the images. Some of those are the approved project, and some are the proposed. We'll flip through that, and then finally, because of this increased height, in order to mitigate the impact of that added height and maintain the FAR, again, we're looking to shrink the top floor profile to set it back even further than we had originally set it back to address that change in height. So this is the approved landscape plan. You'll see some detail, not in color, on the next couple of slides that shows the proposed. But essentially, the scheme is to maintain this idea of a public outdoor space, the exact same size as this plan showed at the south end of the building, very important to the approval in 2022. There would be a retail space fronting on that public space, and the idea is to maintain and improve the multi-use path that runs around the site on town property fronting the pond, and basically create more opportunities actually for people to appreciate the pond than with the existing building that's there and the existing parking lot that's there. So what you'll see now is a series of slides of what was approved in 2022 and what is now being proposed. The first being that below grade parking level. You can see how tightly 50 some odd spaces are packed in with this puzzle system. And on the right is what we're proposing, which is a more conventional ramp coming down, turning into a double loaded aisle for self-parking. But this only gets, a portion of the spaces that the puzzle parking did below grade, so that's what's then pushing parking up to the ground floor. There would also be a bike room located on that level. So on the left, again, was the approved project. You can see the retail on the top is facing Mount Vernon Street, on the south facing the pond. The building lobby in the upper right. Along Converse Place on the left were these two parking lifts, some electrical rooms, trash room, loading would happen along Converse. And then we had 3 residential units at grade facing the pond. On the right is the proposed, which is showing that drive aisle again, similar to what's below grade. And you can see that in order to get now 47 parking spaces, a little more than, or around 1 per unit, a little more, we hope, that we're reducing the size of the lobby a bit and reducing the commercial space, but keeping that on that southern end closest to the pond with the visibility from Main Street and the Main Street Bridge.
Before we go on,
Yes.
Am I the only one on the board who was on this board when we?
Yes.
Yes.
Carrie, would you prefer questions to be held at the end, or can I?
So again, we're mostly listening to the presentation and advising on what the process going forward should be from a planning board perspective. We're not parsing this plan.
So, just so everyone knows, I will not be on this board. So my presence here, I thought, was to help provide some context for what was there. So since I don't know that I'll have another time to speak on this,
Maybe, do you have something urgent you want to say now, or do you want to get through the rest of the
well, there's,
plan discussion?
I think that it's important on this particular one to recognize how unique the residential units were that are being replaced by parking. These were I believe three units which were deemed to be work-live units with very high ceilings, and they were designed almost to be sort of an artist studio, and they would be fronting the walking path. And so this would be a very vibrant part, which is now being replaced by parking.
Yep.
And so I think that's something
I
that,
appreciate that comment.
yeah.
And if I could also just mention, this is true, and we'll obviously be talking about the treatment of that wall. However, first of all, I'd like to mention, and I think David will probably get to this, but even though this is a lower floor-to-floor, we will be maintaining a high floor-to-floor in the retail area and in the lobby area, so that those are very nice lofty spaces. And the second thing is that there was an element, I don't want to call it a privatization, but there was an element of that walking path being connected, obviously, to residential units. And when we re-engage with our landscape architecture team, if we're so authorized to do, we do see the possibility now of that green space being public right up to the face of the building, whereas there was what I would call a zone of stoops and private areas that, in a sense, push the path towards the water. Now that everything essentially that you see on the landscape would be public right up to the face of the building. So I just wanted to make that point, and David, you should keep going.
Yeah. So, and you can see that here. These were the three private entrances, entrance from the bike room, and we're now showing this as landscape. So it's just one way of dealing with the change. And then the top floor, what you see on the left is the profile that we had landed on with the planning board, which was meant to address some of the design guidelines requests for an active roof line. We wanted to create outdoor spaces for every unit, and creating these deep shadows with these almost dormer-like volumes marching around the perimeter of the building. But because we've added a middle floor to get in more units, we now have the ability to squeeze this in a bit, again, to mitigate some of the impact of that heighting. You'll see that in the elevation and 3D views. So now I'll run through a series of views that are successive, approved in 2022, and then proposed.
We already incorporated the changes to the building next door.
Yes.
That looks great.
So this is the approved building looking down Mount Vernon Street, and then the change with a slightly higher level of brick and the setback top story, sixth floor, that's about 7 feet higher than what was there previously. This is the view down Converse Place, looking at the building residential lobby, the two garage door entrances to the former parking lifts, and then these double bays on the second, third floor. And at the top, you'll see the change where these large dormer volumes were right on the edge of the building. In the new one, they're pulled back, but everything is lifted up. So those bays still exist. We have a double height lobby with some sort of entry canopy remaining, and one garage entry in the distance.
And I think we do think that the raised bays make this feel like a more public way to the water than we had before. So we think there's some really nice things about this evolution.
This is the view from across from Town Hall, looking back down Mount Vernon Street. The idea on this side of the building was to have this rhythm of almost townhouse-like volumes with these deep balconies creating those volumes, and then a setback, two series of setbacks up above for more private open spaces looking towards the pond. And then this is the change to raise that volume, but set back the top floor to help mitigate that. And then the view from towards Main Street with the added height and change to the parking entry and the raised bays along Converse.
And I think you can also see, if you go back, David, we're really trying to maintain that retail piece on the corner. You can see the high glass windows and so forth. It's like really a jewel on the waterfront that is actually a celebrated element. We think it would make a great cafe or something along those lines.
And then the view from Main Street Bridge. So the footprint is not changing. The views to Town Hall essentially are the same as the approved, but that height is being raised slightly. This was a series of sections through, including the adjacent buildings, looking from every side of the building that were requested by the Planning Board in 2022. So at the top of these 2 slides is the approved, or 4 slides is the approved building, and then the proposed at the bottom, showing the change of height relative to the adjacent buildings. Again, this is from the south side on the pond, with Town Hall on the right, approved on the top, proposed on the bottom. What you see here to the left of the building is a dash line representing about a 60-foot height of a building as shown in the design guidelines that came with the change in zoning in 2015. So we've dashed that in as potential future development by someone else in the future, just for context. And then this is a section through Converse Place showing, again, the change in height. And the view from Town Hall. And then these are just some close-up views, similar along Mount Vernon Street with the change in height. One point to make here is that the plan is to maintain all of the rich brick detailing, the recesses, the cast stone cornices, frames around the windows that we had spent a lot of time working through with the Planning Board and the design consultants that were on board during that process.
Great.
And then finally, this is a diagram showing the impact of that change in height. You'll see in the approved section on the left, the original floor-to-floor height was 16 feet to accommodate larger retail spaces, lobby, and also the height required for electrical rooms, transformer room. On the right, we're lowering that considerably. We're still accommodating the parking and the need for a handicap van, which is 8'2" clear under the structure with a 12'8" floor to floor. We're reducing slightly the height of the top floor and raising. See the impact of the change in height at the top. And that is it.
Great, thank you for that. I know it's a complicated project, and we appreciate the update. You had submitted a couple of questions about how to deal with administrative questions and minor changes to the special permit. There are a few pieces of the redesign that would constitute fairly major changes to the project: the change in height, the change in the parking configuration, the change in the retail space. Each of those are sort of triggers for us to re-examine the application. So I'm going to defer to Taylor on what the most sort of time-efficient way to get going on this. I know there are outstanding pieces of the project that are going to sort of live on their own timelines, but in the interest of this not once again being a 5-year process. And Larry, it's nice to see you before 10:30 at night.
We spent a year together.
We did. What would be the next best step?
So the next best step for I think everyone here at the table and everyone in town is to have a better understanding of what's happening through the select board and what's happening in Concom. we don't want to kind of jump the gun and start a approval process. I think this starts the kind of understanding of what's the responsibility with the planning board. As Carrie pointed out, we have those three, and we've met prior, so we know we knew what those three big things were going to be. But at this time, don't let me speak for the board, but it's the opinion of the board that we should wait until we have a clearer avenue of what's happening in Concom and with the select board before we start with the approval process. One thing to note is that, and this is going to be a discussion that we will have to have together between the applicants and the planning board, is what is the severity of these changes, and do they constitute just changes to conditions, or do they constitute as changes to the whole application process? That's not a determination that I can make for the board. I can certainly recommend to them what they should do, but that's a discussion that we're going to have.
Could I ask you to describe for us and for our viewers what the issues are before the select board and the Concom?
Would someone on?
Sure. Be happy to. Thank you. So, can I believe Carrie was on the Conservation Commission?
I was.
You'll probably want to check what I'm saying to make for accuracy, because we're a fresh face. We weren't involved in it, but we have a good understanding, I think, of what's gone on. So basically, I would describe it as right now there were two issues that the Planning Board approved conditioned upon Conservation Commission approval, and there were two objections from Conservation Commission. One related to the state wetlands permitting, and that requires us to get an area of mitigation that is either off-site. And so if we're going to operate off-site, we need the select board to approve any off-site operations on town-owned property. So we're going through a process now with Conservation Commission is going to sort of identify. The Conservation Commission is going to identify some high priority sites around town that would be good for such mitigation. We presented some ideas that Larry and we had around Mill Pond, and the Conservation Commission members that we spoke with after the meeting and during that meeting didn't think those were the best sites that could be chosen. So they're going to, at a subsequent Conservation Commission meeting, give us a list of sites. And then we would in turn present those back to the Select Board and ultimately ask the Select Board for approval to go do the mitigation, the planting, the cleanup work on the town-owned property. Once we have that approval in place, then the DEP has indicated that they would be issuing a superseding order of conditions to resolve the Conservation Commission's objection. And did I get that fairly accurately?
Very good.
Okay. Larry's taught me. So that's in front of the Select Board, to answer your question. So we'll be going back soon to get that approval to do the off-site mitigation of the areas that hopefully Conservation Commission will recommend to us. That's the primary role of the Select Board, and separately, there's obviously the other aspect. The Conservation Commission had a second objection, which is, I guess, in litigation now regarding the aesthetics of the site. Specifically, I think the reviews of the water resource from Mount Vernon Street, and of course, we believe that there's a difference of interpretation there, and we believe that the water resource is going to be reactivated by this project. We're going to be improving the bike path, improving the courtyard green space with the retail that will be fronting it, and have no real loss. In fact, a gain of that view corridor with the development. So that's the second piece that needs to be resolved, till it's really a little separate from the Select Board's resolution.
So how much does your project obviously requires that you resolve the issue about the view shed. how can you move forward without knowing that that'll be resolved in your favor?
Well, our goal is to sort of do this in sequence in some cases and in parallel in others. So obviously coming to you for approval of the proposed changes, that's sort of working in parallel. And then, of course, in sequence, we believe that once the superseding order of conditions from the DEP is issued, essentially the writing is on the wall that, although they're different regulatory constructs, the writing would be on the wall that, the project is sort of seen as favorably moving forward, both from an environmental perspective, from a town perspective, perhaps the select board or the planning board indicating that as such, and we would be able to move forward. We'd hope that we could come to some sort of settlement or rescission of the lawsuit with Conservation Commission, because what we've offered with Select Board, for example, is to fund this mitigation. We need the mitigation, of course, to be compliant, but also it's good for the town, so it's sort of a win-win, and for conservation and for the town in general, because some important areas would be mitigated and the project would move forward. So we just see it really as moving both in parallel and a little bit in sequence.
Okay.
So knowing that a lot of this project is hinged on the decisions that are out of our hands and the negotiations with the select board that are out of our hands, I would take advice from Taylor and feedback from the board on what the process, what the way forward for the changes is.
I have a process question that
I have many process questions. Kick us off.
it was, I believe in the select board meeting, it said that you wanted this wrapped up, whatever that means, by the end of the Winchester's fiscal year. I'm trying to understand
Again,
things if that's, I don't know how we
again,
should get-
I think it's helpful for the planning board to think about the planning board.
Well,
And I know
trying to think
it's a
of how our
sequence of
timing
events.
would dovetail with that timing is what I'm, like, my question is, can we actually do what would need to get done if by June 30th? I think that's just something, if that's a hard stop for them, I think we just need that as a background for us.
I mean,
If it is, and if it's not a hard
I
stop,
feel like the
then-
timelines are out of our hand. I think the decision that we, I don't disagree with you at all. I think the timelines that are outside of this board are out of our control, and the best thing that we can do is decide what the steps the planning board should take for the changes that are proposed is. So if that's a new application, if that's a new set of conditions, if that's, how do we want to revisit this project as a board, knowing that the project itself has multiple parts that we cannot be part of? I just want to make sure we don't run, I think at some point a joint meeting would be great between the select board, the Conservation Commission. The CBDRS will help coordinate, historic and design review. And in the same way, I think for this particular project, once other pieces are in place, a joint meeting would be really helpful. But in terms of, can we send them away with any idea of what our next step would be, or what do we know can't happen? I feel like that would be a nice courtesy, but.
Well, I think the biggest decision before this board is whether the changes are significant enough to require a new permit application. I mean, that's the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room. And the other questions are, so the board has some negotiating power in terms of perhaps more conditions on the project, in terms of accepting this as a continuation of the original. I know we had some deep discussions about affordability when we looked at this last time, because of the rather vaguely worded part of the PUD talks about increasing diversity of units. So I think, in my mind, looking at the loss of those work-live units, I think that was a major component of trying to provide a diversity of units. Those are gone. the enlivenment of Mount Vernon, where now, this particular design loses 2/3 of the frontage, or whatever it is. So I think it'll be a very complex discussion, and I don't think we should tie this board's deliberations to what the select board needs to do, because I think we're looking at a whole different set of decisions and research and analysis. So
I think we've seen smaller changes to projects. If we can take ourselves out of this particular project, I think we've seen smaller changes to projects and decided that it required a new application. This is keeping the same footprint, but we've seen this is a height change, this is a parking arrangement change. We need so much more information before we can make an educated decision, and we're walking the line between.
And I think it's really important to recognize the level of interest this building has engendered in the town residents. And so there should be a sufficient amount of time set aside for public comment. And so that, of course, will delay, well, I won't say delay, it will extend the process. So, I think the timeline we went through last time was quite extended, and I'm sure you folks don't want to have it quite as extended this time. But those are the only words I have left.
If I could just say a word. Sorry. If I could just, I completely understand all the comments that are being made, and I think that some guidance from you about where that threshold falls would be probably very helpful to the proponent, because it was years. It was years of discussion, and I don't think the proponent has years to discuss this further. Really.
To be clear, the town does not want this to go on for more. We
That's
all
right.
want to see a better result
And
for
we
that
have,
property.
and we've worked, and our new client is committed to maintaining so much of what we worked so hard to establish in terms of the quality of materials, the proportions. There was so much to our discussion, and I'm not at all discounting anything that you're saying, Diab, but I think that it would. I'm kind of hoping, pleading for some kind of acknowledgement of the work that has been done as we look at next steps, so that we can actually carry what you mentioned, which is, get this project forward, get the waterfront improved, create hopefully a beautiful new landmark in town.
And I believe the select board took, do you have a sense of timeline from anyone else?
Yes, I think so. Our feeling is that Conservation Commission noted that they couldn't get the discussion about the potential mitigation sites on their agenda for their next meeting, which when we were speaking last week, I think that was maybe this week or next week. So perhaps that's 2 more weeks when they have their subsequent meeting. And then once we get that list, which was requested also by the select board and in our conversations, then we would go back, and perhaps that's the April or the last March meeting of the select board. So that sort of time frame, roughly the next 30 days. And for whatever it's worth, just context, fully appreciate your timeline will operate on the timeline it needs to operate on. But just so you know, the timeline we're operating on, if I may, it kind of addresses the point. Okay. Basically, the urgency for us is because 2 things. One, at the end of the fiscal year, a whole bunch of rules and regulations on the building permit side change, right? So a lot of the work we've been doing, because we're inheriting some older work, doesn't incorporate the kinds of changes that might, come about.
This is the stretch energy code?
Yes, and so it's even beyond the stretch energy code, right? It's the FIAS requirements. So we're trying to navigate through that on our side. But there's that. But even still, the overlay of the reality of foreclosure looming overhead. The bank has been quite patient, as we understand, with the previous owner. And for us to take ownership we need, a clear path that's relatively expedited. It can't, like you said, it can't be, and you don't want it to be, a long, protracted process, although we respect the need to flesh these things out together. And so it's a balance. So in that case, we're operating against a timeline. They have told us that we have to close in short order. We've pegged that at the end of the fiscal year for that second reason. So we have a few months, but not too much time, to get a building permit submission in. If we miss those opportunities, the project becomes more complex from a design perspective, and the project becomes perhaps unviable from an acquisition perspective. What the bank could do is ultimately foreclose, put it at auction, and someone else will come along, not us, to go develop perhaps a project that doesn't have the same attention and care that we are trying to give it. We appreciate that the building is really an important component to the Winchester streetscape, and we are trying to respect the original planning board decision as much as we can. That's why we kept the same envelope. In fact, we shrunk it back, although we raised it up a little. We thought that was a good trade. And we sort of were trying to make all of our changes interior, notwithstanding the fact that they do, of course, change those 3 residential units or shift the retail, which wasn't that probably going to be viable anyway on Mount Vernon, to the back, and so on. But we tried to keep a balance and appreciate all the hard work that you've all done and these guys have done before us.
Okay, great. I am going, do we feel, I feel like we have enough information for the board to have our discussion, so I am going to thank all of you for coming in. You're obviously welcome to stay. It's a public meeting, but I'm going to invite you to scoot back from the table if you don't mind.
Thank you very much.
One
You have a last
suggestion?
question? Go for it.
I think it would be really useful for this board if you provided the full set of final plans from the previous proposal to the board. I have hard copy at home, but I'm sure they would prefer something digital.
Oh, sure.
And I can hand anyone my one copy of the 10 Converse Place plan.
What? You don't want it for the memory box.
I know it was a wonderful experience for you, so. No, but we would be happy to share that, and I think to your point about the mix of units and all of that. I'm sorry. I apologize. I to your point about the mix of units, and the unit configuration has changed a little bit, of course, because of the configuration, and it creates some opportunities as well. So for the board to consider. So we will absolutely share those with you, before and after, so they're very clear.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
We will get this done. So let's hear our recommendation from Taylor, and then we'll make a quick decision as a board what our next step should be.
I think that for context for the board, I think that we should all sit down together and look at the decision that was written. Dia was the only member who was a part of that decision. The decision has quite a few conditions and includes quite a few documents. I think it's good for everyone to understand what is in that, and that should help us make a decision, or start making decisions as to what our next steps should be. I also think that that should be done in public hearing, and I think that I personally think that public process should start immediately, given that this happened today, and I know that I have heard from several residents and constituents who want to have more information. So if we start that right away with the goal of reviewing the conditions together on the first Tuesday in April, whatever.
April 1st.
April 1st.
Excellent. Thank you. Does anyone have concerns about that recommendation, or do we feel like that's...
That makes sense.
There's a lot of material, and there's a lot of history as to how the design got to where it is. So that'll, I don't know how to capture that. Go back and look at
And
hundreds of hours of planning board meetings.
Just to take that one step further, the result of that meeting would either be to decide to ask the applicants to start a fresh application or to extend the conditions on the project as it's permitted.
Correct.
But we would be going in with a robust body of information. Okay, so we will get that on the schedule for April 1st.
April 1st, not the meeting. We have a meeting.
Don't have enough time.
Don't have time.
Post the public hearing, because it'll be a public
Oh, yeah.
hearing.
And you should have the new board member with you.
Yes.
Yeah, there's going to be some homework.
Although we will miss your institutional knowledge.
Try not to
I,
think about
I will
that.
try really hard to miss being here.
Okay, we are going to hop backwards to 16 Hancock. Okay. Just going to take a brief break to let the crowd thin out.
Is there a reason it's 90 degrees in this room?
Warm outside.
Well, we complained about the temperature last time being too cold.
It's too hot, it's too cold, we are the Goldilocks.
It's the $6 million worth of work we need to do for the HVAC system here.
They heard us,
Exactly.
you know?
Okay, all right, we're taking a brief break if anyone needs a break.
way it is. So that's where we stand. It's been represented to be the only change that directly impacts the planning board. There may be many other changes in this document, but we only have this one page, that indirectly impact us, and that we may, when town meeting comes around, choose to review and make an opinion on it. But this is directly for the Committee on Government Regulations, whether we want to support this or recommend unfavorable action on this.
I'm happy to say things.
Go for it.
So I note that all of the changes, except for the planning board, have a clause saying ideally a qualified architect or ideally a registered professional for the other boards, but for the planning board it says shall. So right away.
So it's personal, is what you're saying.
Well, no, right away what it's saying is that, the other boards have more flexibility, and I don't see the point why the planning board should be singled out to not have similar flexibility. I also think that, I don't know why the planning board is supposed to be in charge of capital asset management systems and processes as the person we select.
They're so optimistic about our volunteer pool.
I know.
Well, I just don't know that it's the planning board's.
Right.
That's not
our
what
issue.
we do.
Right.
So if someone's selected by the planning board, if it's not to be from the board, should have experience related to what the board does. So this is like saying, you're a football team, tell us who's a great golfer. I'm really bad at sports.
Right.
So there we go.
It delivered. I was
So-
thinking of the song that went viral over the summer that the hook was, I'm looking for a guy in finance, 6'5", blue eyes. That's basically the only person we could appoint under those criteria.
There is probably a series on TV where that occurs, but so I'm really not loving this at all. I think this is in the wrong direction. I think that it's too prescriptive, and it doesn't actually speak to what the individual boards, what their purview is. So I would
Go for it. Go to the motion.
I would
lean
move for unfavorable recommendation, or whatever we want to call it, on this.
That works. I would second that.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Any further discussion? I think we can go to a vote. All in favor of not favoring this? It's unanimous.
All in disfavor of
All in
favor.
disfavor.
Can I ask if the committee is okay with me going to the Committee on Government and Regulations and relaying that on Monday night? Or do you want to go to that meeting?
Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Going to the other one, so I figured.
Keep it up.
They know me by now.
So do we have to put in our next budget a bulletproof vest for you?
Are you safe?
I think I'm safe.
Do you need a signal?
I'm good.
Okay, our grand finale, to circle back to 16 Hancock Street. We still don't have anyone here from that. They are, where are they in their process? And this is a single-family home. This is a large parcel on Hancock Street. Single-family home on Hancock Street that is already beyond the maximum footprint and going even further beyond the maximum footprint.
I think it's beyond the maximum floor area, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, beyond the maximum floor area. Thank you for the correction. They are adding a mudroom and a garage, removing some trees in the process, and violating no setbacks. This is just for floor area increase.
Was there a memo on this from the planning department?
Is there a memo on it?
From the planning department.
Should be on. That's on the table.
Oh, of course.
No one thinks to look for the paper anymore.
Oh, but where's the handy table?
The table's in the handout here,
So
Yeah, the table is on.
yeah, is it their table or our table? I never trust their table.
Hold on. Page 51.
Yeah, it's right in the neighborhood.
Page 61 or 51?
51, I think.
51. Okay, so this is their calculation.
I took a look at it there.
It's reasonable?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about a foot or two here,
Okay.
a little fussing around maybe, but no,
I
that makes
just,
sense.
I have seen in the past that numbers differ.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let's take a look at setbacks. I don't, other than the one, so the question is, are they increasing their nonconformity?
Do you know off the top of your head, are they increasing their nonconformity?
Ian is responsible for this one.
Ian, do you know if they're increasing their nonconformity?
I mean, they've got the same, they're okay with the setbacks on the new
Well, they're increasing their nonconformity because they're going from a nonconforming floor area to a more nonconforming floor area.
Well, floor area is not something we actually mandate, is it?
It is.
It mandates site
That's
plan
what
review.
that's what triggered
triggers,
it.
yeah.
Oh, yeah,
3,600 feet in this.
Yeah, but it's not.
Yes.
It's just a trigger for a
trigger.
site plan review.
Yeah. I don't think
The
it's-
state won't allow you to mandate floor areas.
I'm not really clear why the basement's counting. They don't really give us, well, there's a note here, all underground.
Well, if it's all underground, is it at least, I mean, it's a basement if at least half of the,
Is above the
is
mean,
above grade.
right, the mean.
Yeah.
It's on a hill.
It's not
yeah, no,
all
I
underground.
drove by
I mean,
it.
it's a
It's-
mudroom.
It's definitely a basement. There's no,
No, but half, it's on a hill.
Yeah.
Half could be,
yeah, anyway, I
don't know.
I took a,
So.
I think it's,
In terms of their, it looks like they're probably okay in terms of their greenscape, or whatever we want to call it, the hardscape
Impervious area?
impervious area. I don't,
well, they've addressed it with, they have a stormwater system.
Yeah, there are the trees coming down because they're installing the infiltration ditch? You know? Ian, do you know? Because it looks like that's going to be an underground infiltration system, but they're taking down trees for it. So can't tell if that's for the installation, for the root problems you'd have with and they also have a very tall row of trees. And and then I can't tell what they're taking down.
which page does it show the landscape?
Well, the landscape is marked. Hold on, I'm scrolling past 400 pages of
Yeah, I
hydrology
know.
report for Taylor
Is it
Herman.
at the,
Everything.
I did not. I said those should be in a
yeah,
separate folder that we could refer to.
oh, here we go.
Get
It's on
this man's
page,
in good sleep.
page-
So if you look at page 98,
there's also something on 103.
98 marks the trees to be removed, and 103 does not mark the ones that are coming out. It marks the ones that are staying. So it notes a tree line, but then I can't tell the ones on 98 that are being removed. I just don't have a sense of the scale. If you look at the tree line, I can't tell if these are the super tall ones.
They're not.
Okay.
We talked about this last night.
So the small, they're the little scraggy ones? Okay. Okay.
I don't recall a large, I drove by yesterday. I don't recall a large tree in front.
Not in front. So the tree line that they're talking about is the one between them and the neighboring property, right?
Yeah, okay, but I don't think that would impinge on it.
I don't think so either, but they have two being removed and you can't really see them from the street. So I'm assuming they're smaller?
Very tall
The ones
fence.
I'm looking at,
Yeah,
they indicate this drawing, the
yeah.
caliper less than 6.
This is less than 6 inches.
they
but I
allege
just
that
can't
they're
tell if
all
they're-
are less, all that are being removed are less than 6 inches in the narrative. That they're, no,
To look at
I
the drawing,
didn't
that's what
trespass to
it
measure them. I'm
says.
just trying to get my head around.
Trees to be removed, all less than 6.
I think some of these are tiny and kind of scraggy, so they're not. Oh,
Okay.
there we go. Yes, see, so that row on the left is what I'm talking about. I can't tell if any of those are the ones that are being removed or if it's these little ones in the
I think
middle.
they'd have to be, because that's where the garage is going.
Yeah.
But they're only showing,
Well, do we have a, I
I mean, we
mean,
can't do much about it. I'm just trying to get my head around it. The other,
Yeah.
I was hoping they would be here. The massing of it is a bit weird.
well, I think they're,
I mean, in any recommendation we can put forward, reiterate that trees greater than 6 inches. First of all, site plan approval if they're less than 6 inches, is not sort of in the site plan review.
I mean, there's also room to sort of say, it's not 6 inches in caliper, but it's definitely part of the canopy of the yard. Is it,
I agree.
can you
But
scooch?
those trees are tall. I would be hard pressed to think they're
That's what
6
I'm
inches. I mean, 6 inches is a tree that's, 25 feet tall is unlikely to have a.
Are you thinking like those trees?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the tree line, right?
No,
There's a,
I'm going to go back to the 98.
they
Right,
presented a 3D presentation
yes.
that might be a clear view if you exit out of this. It's on
So
the,
those?
Oh, that right
so you have to exit out of Adobe, or actually,
Oh, wow.
yeah, sorry. I don't know if this helps, but
If they go at the right angle, we might be able to see the trees.
they try to do every angle. I think.
So well, it's hard to tell. They're big.
No, it was
It looks
very
like they're
hard
not
to
taking-
tell.
if you-
Without trespassing, I wasn't going to be able to do it.
Well, can we bring up Google Maps and just have a,
So Google Earth is
Side view.
always better for this, but it's not.
Whichever-
always using well.
That's
Google
blurred out
Earth,
on
but you
Google
have
Maps.
to-
No, we all.
That was weird.
You can do that. You can
Oh, you
file
have
to have your
Google Earth
maps
on here. Is
blurred
it
out
updated?
if you want that.
16 Hancock Street, Winchester. Hancock. I know, it's the best part of the meeting. Okay, there we go. Yes, there we go. See, so,
So those trees on the side there are the same trees that they show in their rendering as remaining.
but the two coming out don't stand out from the tree line. That's why I was trying to figure out where things were going.
so they're taking out,
I can't tell if the infiltration ditch is kind of right against the fence, and two of those are a little out of step, or if there's two scraggy ones.
so it looks like most of the arborvitae on the other side of the fence, so I doubt those are coming out.
No, I don't.
And so the only two that
They're not
will be
gonna
coming
survive.
out,
Yeah, good luck.
I think it's that thing right there.
Yep, yep.
And if there's another tree, it's probably molded in here, but all the other trees are on the other side of this fence.
And
So,
it's that little cluster next to the
so this
car.
thing would, this remains.
Yep, okay. So they'll basically keep the shielding and what's probably a decent amount of habitat,
Yeah.
even though it's probably not long for the.
It's not going to, arborvitae's don't. You see this dimension, you're going to have to overdig that.
So
And then did design review look at this yet?
I thought they did. Am
I'm not.
Ian?
Historics looked at it, but I don't.
I think design review meets tomorrow.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to trust design review because this looks like a Lego set. It's like the mudroom is, the roof line is off from the garage is off. I mean, it's literally 4 separate massing.
And the angles, just because it's on a hill, it's hard.
It's-
It's hard to tell if that looks good or not.
I think it.
So
I think it.
I would,
If I were to, I mean, it's fine. If I were to do anything, I think I'd. The transition is a little abrupt. Would work on that a little.
Yeah, even just bring them,
Mudroom. I think I'd. And then you could have a little more. The gable roof they put on it is attractive. A little more, but
yeah, I mean,
it's mostly the transition that's a little clumsy.
yeah, it's 4 separate bricks that don't, like, scoot it. And I don't know, maybe there's nothing that can be done. I'm not the person. As long as they're going to design review, I feel good.
Tricky part.
yeah, I mean, from the planning board perspective, it doesn't, I don't think that it is offensive to the rest of the neighborhood in terms of its massing. It's kind of weird looking. I'll
Yeah, it's not
grant
offensive, but it's not, even the examples that they sent around, it's not the same.
that. Yeah.
Road. None of the examples were on
Well,
that
first of all,
road.
yes, Hancock and Hillcrest are not the same road.
Oh, okay. How different are they in terms of the feel of the houses and such? I did not visit this.
They're on a hill.
This is the largest lot on that street.
Yeah, it's a
It's
big lot.
very
It's-
large.
It's like double width.
Sheesh.
Well, you see the other examples that they gave, you at least have, you have a primary home and then a secondary garage mass. You don't have,
Yeah, so I guess if I were to make a motion I would move, holy cow, that looks weird. Sorry, from the back, it's just,
From the back of the proposed property, or are you looking at some of the
yeah,
examples?
there's this thing that looks like a chimney or an elevator or something in between the two buildings.
Oh, that is a chimney on.
Yeah, and I couldn't tell if the weird massing was to preserve an element of the home or if that was added.
So I would say that I don't think this is. I mean, there's a from a planning board perspective, separate from a design perspective.
I know, but we don't want to approve something that the neighbors are going to be like, what?
Yeah. So
Can we look at 957 and just walk through those? It feels like walk through site plan approval and just
oh, you mean actually do our job and look at what the regs say?
just
It's
throwing
an
that out
option.
there, spitballing. Minimize unreasonable departure from the character, materials, and scale of buildings in the vicinity.
I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't think the scale is off,
The-
but
The character's a little clunky.
I mean, is anyone bothered by the fact that the garage is front facing?
Well, they addressed that.
Yeah, they addressed that. They said
And-
they tried to put it side facing in the turnaround.
And, you know, whenever you do that, put it on the side, you always end up with more impervious. It's just,
has to happen.
this is clearly the more efficient. You're gonna have more, you're gonna have more green space. I mean, I think it's nicely done, except, the transition, that the roof over the mudroom. Just to live with this, you just think about the snow piling up against that side of the roof. The snow being caught between the two buildings. I'd put a lot of rubber on that
There'll be a
wall.
big icicle somewhere too, probably.
Yeah, that back one where the
Well,
chimney is up to
only
the
if you
shore.
have, you get ice when you have heat escaping. If you insulate it well.
If they do a
you-
good job, they won't
Yeah,
have
they will.
this.
I'm sure it's
So-
an excellent, but,
Yeah, it looks like this is just going to be, they'll be, although I guess
oh no, I was
that's-
thinking right here,
This window's here.
right here. You're gonna have,
I mean,
but
I could imagine that they would take out the big chimney in the back, that they extend the roof line of the original.
Is the chimney there on the original house?
Yes.
Okay,
Then what
so
the
they
heck
can't,
is-
they're building around that, I think.
What is
I
it?
mean, in this sense, it almost
But it's not.
it breaks it up a little to have it instead of one behemoth. It almost looks like, okay, maybe it's two structures, which is maybe a little more palatable.
To me, it looks like four structures. If the
those-
mudroom
yeah.
came out closer to flush with the garage, or either the
Right.
front came forward or the roof came up, at least you would have kind of the classic home garage with a walkway, with a
Right,
carriage
right.
walk or something.
Yeah.
Let's see, what is
This
C?
is like
I mean,
home
the
carriage walk, bad
porch,
kids
or
garage.
I guess the family room was already there.
Okay. Well,
Mudroom, whatever.
I'm sure it's unreasonable. Like I look back at it's not unreasonable departure. We might say it's not what we want. DRC might say something, but I feel like from the
It's
from the
not-
bylaws, it's not unreasonable.
no, it's not a contemporary edition, which,
Yeah, the design is not out of character, but it's
Not
not
3D
it's
printed.
not
so
what we're after.
I would, if I were to write up or consider a motion, I would say that we recommend favorable action and also recommend that the roof line between the new carriage or the new garage and the house be aligned or something. It would look so much better if they didn't have that,
we'd like a smoother transition.
a smoother transition.
What you have
Or
is,
drop it to the roof line, drop the
just
mud
have
rooms
to-
to create one long.
you want to, like, your eye keeps wanting that eave line over that one-story side room on the original house to just go straight into the wall of the garage and not drop down all in it, kind of orphaned,
Right.
almost even with the roof, the little shed roof that comes off the front of the garage. It's you want to. I'm sure they looked at it.
I'm sure they did too, but I do know. I mean, they will
wanted to
happily
look
come
at it
back
again.
with fresh incarnations, and I don't think all our ideas are bad,
So
even if they're.
Your motion was, or was it?
mean,
Were you
the-
just
the
thinking
diff-
about what a motion might be?
I was testing the waters, and the waters seemed fine.
Recommend favorable action and recommend the roof line between the garage or the transition.
Just the transition.
Transition.
The transition between the existing roof,
It's a playroom, they call it.
yeah, but
Existing playroom,
to the new mudroom be,
I mean, I can go either way. I would almost make the motion, the roof of the mudroom be brought in line with either the garage or the playroom. I don't care if they go up or down.
I'm not
Oh,
sure.
I would-
I'm not sure I'd tell them exactly.
I would go down.
I'd
rather
go
than
down.
up.
I mean, I would go down.
I think
Because-
just do something that looks nice.
Because it's symmetric, the garage is now symmetric, and if they popped up, they would look
Yeah,
lopsided.
Right.
yeah.
The architect knows what we're talking about. We
Okay.
struggle
All right,
with it.
okay.
There was a struggle here.
Okay.
So did you distill that?
Recommend favorable
Smooth
action
that.
and recommend the transition between the existing playroom and the new mudroom have a smoother transition is what I've heard, because I don't know if, say, go up or down, it's going to...
Go down.
Or better
Well, we
integration.
won't weigh in. We will just say smoother transition.
Okay, okay.
Allow the architect some license, even though it's not usually how we roll, but we're open to change. Okay.
I'll second that.
Let's just, you know,
But I
Mike,
have
Further
some
discussion?
questions.
Go ahead.
absolutely, let's see if they come up with a better idea we never even thought of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I
I
agree.
mean, they got the expertise and the,
Yeah.
you know,
And they know how to make a small
and
change.
they haven't
They will-
done
they
this,
will-
do this all the time.
They will turn it into a pure glass transition.
There'll be a carousel when we're done with it, just.
My question is regarding the, all those groundwater charts. They're going to go directly to ZBA. Do we want to
Well,
have anything in this to say that they make sure they follow whatever they're told by engineering?
I assume that engineering's going to write a letter, either support it or with comment.
Yeah, and they have,
I'm willing to go
There's
along
still
with
in
whatever.
discussions with the
yeah,
engineer.
Yeah, whatever engineering.
they have to follow whatever.
Yeah,
engineer
I just want to make sure that we
We
it's
could
one,
also-
again, it's one of the site plan approval guidelines to provide adequate stormwater management and other. I just want to make sure, again, following just what we're supposed to be
So-
looking at.
Yeah,
Is there a decision hard date on this? Do we have another week or no? I mean, 2 weeks? No. We
But-
have to
but-
decide
Oh, they're
by-
going to probably meet
But
before.
we don't have to weigh in on
We don't
that.
have to, you're right.
ZBA weighs in on that.
True, indeed.
The
That's a
ZBA's meeting,
Different
so we need to give a
advisory
recommendation.
body, which is
Okay.
town engineering.
So we will recommend favorable
So we have a
action.
motion and a second.
Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor? Okey-doke.
Is that it?
Yes.
How did we manage to do
I
that?
thought we were going to be, I told my wife we'd be here till 11 tonight.
Not on my watch.
That's great.
You know, you're welcome to stay.
She's probably having a party at home. You know, she's like, I got till 11.
It's here. There's just
Do you
people
want me
jumping
to
around.
call up and ask for Brian and see if it's really noisy in the background?
I'd rather not.
All right, we are set to detonate again on the 18th of March. It will be a sad day.
Or a happy day?
For one,
Or
I think
both.
let's put
Or
that to a
both.
vote. The emotion of the next meeting will be. All right, so anything else, or should I take a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Wow, how'd that happen?
Have you gotten to where you drive around for
Thank
a
you,
while before you go
WinCam.
home yet? Or are you still ready to get back in there?